Pick up where we left off talking about the number of the beast. But before we do, let's open with a word of prayer. Kind Father, thank you again for letting us be here. Thank you for letting us gather. Thank you for sending your word to us down these many years. Father, we pray that we'd always get deep in your word. Help us to understand the things that we need to understand. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So here in chapter 13, one of the most famous chapters in all of Revelation, because here we talk about this number of the beast. And over the years, about 2,000 years, there's been all kinds of speculation. And people have preached sermons on the number of the beast, and it means various things depending on where they are and when they are, what country they're in, and so forth. And it's really quite amazing. When we still had the Bible bookstore here in Hattiesburg, I remember going in one time and just looking in that section. They had a section of books on Revelation. It wasn't gigantic, but it was several. And I was just flipping through them. It is really quite astonishing to see the variety of ideas that come through. So we know that here in this neighborhood of chapter 13, John has revealed to us this idea, this image, and as I always think about my big tapestry that we're building, this big picture of the dragon. And there's no need to wonder about the dragon because John tells us who it is. He tells us who the dragon is in Hebrew. He uses the old Hebrew word Satan, the adversary. Now, of course, we just say Satan in English. And then he tells us who it is in Greek, diabolos in Greek, the devil, we would say. So, no uncertainty there. And then we go on to the great beast from the sea and the great beast from the land. And then chapter 13 continues, and then we get toward the end of that chapter, and we start talking about the number of the beast. So let's see if we can dig into this and figure out what the text is really trying to tell us. So this is about where we left off last time. So here we are in chapter 13, verse 16. So, also the beast causes everybody, both the little people and the big, important, rich, fancy people. The rich and the poor, the free and the slave, causes them to be marked. Now we remember looking in the Old Testament about the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, etc., etc. You shall write this on your forehead. You shall bind this to your arm, etc. And we know a lot of the Jews took this very literally. And they actually had a little box, a leather box, black leather box, strapped around their forehead. And in that leather box, the tefillin, there were 4 compartments and there were 4 little scrolls with scriptures, one of which was Deuteronomy 6, etc. And so, therefore, with this thing on your head during prayers, it would help, they would say, to think about the Lord, think about the scriptures. And then the one that wraps around your arm, another little box, up here on your bicep, close to your heart, and then 7 wraps around your arm with this leather strap, and then finally coming down and wrapping 3 times around your middle finger, and then the rest just dangles wherever. And so now with this next to your heart, on your head, you're always thinking during prayer time of the Lord. And do you remember I showed you that painting of an Israeli soldier? And it's based on the idea that a number of these soldiers do wear these as they get ready to go into battle. And I saw a news clip a few months ago of interviewing this Israeli soldier who was wearing a tefillin on his arm, on his forehead. And the newspaper reporter or the TV reporter said, "Excuse me, I see you've got the tefillin." "Of course I do." And he's also carrying like their version of an M16 rifle. And the TV reporter said, "So which one protects you, the tefillin or this rifle?" And he said, "Both." Like, duh, both do. So therefore, he was going with this approach. The scriptures were always on his forehead and always on next to his heart. So here we read about the opposite of this, the anti-Shema, the people that follow the beast. And we see in this section, John really, I'm sorry, Tom.
That so much is made of this number, this name being on a But, you know, in the start of chapter 14, it starts off with God's got his name written on the forehead of those that don't serve the beast.
Exactly.
It's just showing, you know, basically who owns you, who do you serve, you know.
Exactly.
It's just really a simple thing and it's been made so much of.
Yeah, very straightforward, really. We look at the text, and it's not really this spooky, ghostly, you know, thing, really. It's this image, the symbolism of two choices. There's only two choices. Are you one of God's people, or are you one of the enemy's people, the world people? You know, Paul, when he writes these letters to various churches, he often will mention that. The world, he will say, versus the spirit, or the spirit versus the flesh. And so here are these two same choices rolled out in this amazing apocalyptic style by John. Two choices. So he causes these guys that are following the beast to be marked. Okay, oh, you're a beast guy. Now, is this a literal mark? You know, some people think it's a barcode that is like tattooed on your arm, or it's a microchip under your skin, et cetera, et cetera. Depending on what time you live, people have interpreted this mark in different ways. Now, an interesting thing about this, mainly this comes to us from the 2nd and 3rd century. So that's all I could swear to, that I've read the original text about this. But in a number of Roman cities in the 2nd and 3rd century, there was a problem with people that were citizens of the city not doing their civic obligation, not going to the various temples, temple of Zeus, etc. And most of these cities would pick their patron god. Like, remember Ephesus, when Paul had this trouble? And these people were running around saying, great is Diana of the Ephesians, or the Greek name of that would be Artemis. And so they would have their patron god, as well as temples to all the other gods, too, especially the big dog god, Zeus. But if you weren't doing your civic duty, which was to go, at least occasionally, and offer the necessary sacrifice to the temple of choice of that city, then you were not a good citizen. And people would worry about you. You know, what are you up to? You know, you don't really belong here, do you? You scofflaw, you foreigner, or whatever. And so in some of these cities, what they started doing is they said, okay, we're going to fix this. Everybody has to come in to one of the temples over the next few months or so, and we'll write you a certificate of worship called a libellus, or libelli for plural. And they would give you this libellus, and it would say, basically, a little document, it would say, I, the observer, the witness, the official, affirm that Charles came into the temple of something on this day and did his civic duty and sacrificed the necessary things to the god. So he's a good guy, he's a good citizen. And if you were not a good citizen, you kind of were frowned upon. And see where this says you couldn't sell or buy or something? Well, you weren't welcome in the marketplace. If you were a scofflaw, you were not a good citizen of the Roman city. And so this idea kind of really existed. Now, I couldn't find anything that I would trust that said this was going on back in the 1st century, but I definitely can in 2nd and 3rd century. So it's just an interesting idea.
Well, you know, soldiers mark themselves with their generals' names and times.
Ah, there you go.
Slaves were marked.
Who do you follow? Yeah.
And where was it? Antigonus Epiphanes,
Yeah, Epiphanes,
ran the
uh-huh.
Jews with the Ivy League. So it was a common phrase to be marked or to show the symbol of who you follow.
Of who you follow. The two choices, right? You either have the mark of God, the scriptures on your head, or you have the mark of the beast, whatever that is. So nobody can buy or sell unless you are a good citizen, in this case, in my example. And look at this odd phrase. The mark, the number of the name. Now, what on earth is a number of a name? Before John's going to tell us the mark of the beast, just down to this next sentence, 666, he says, look, this takes some wisdom if you're going to decipher this. This takes some understanding. And you need to calculate. Look at all these clues that John is giving us. And this number it's just a guy. It's just a man. It's not some great and fearful, gigantic monster creature. It's a man. It's a man, and his number is 666. So that's interesting. So all these clues are in here. So right away we know there's something that is going to take wisdom and understanding. It's the number of a name. It's going to take some calculation, and it's a guy. It's just a person. Yeah, Tom?
Yeah, I think it's kind of implied. You need to be careful and not follow this, not fall into this. It's going to take some thinking, some calculating. In other words, you're going to have to put your mind to it. It's going to be easy to be deceived, so to speak.
Exactly. And now this also kind of points to my general idea that this apocalyptic letter John's writing serves another purpose, which is to kind of hide the message for the Romans. If he was, we know he was under house arrest basically on the island of Patmos. And so it's logical, therefore, if we look at other prisoners that were kept in similar circumstances, prisoners of the government and so forth, and they were in isolation on this little island of Patmos, you isolate them so they can't really influence the people that are causing you trouble on the mainland. So how could you get messages out? If you just said, let's just say this was during the reign of Emperor Nero, before he killed himself in AD 68. Or maybe later when Emperor Domitian was ruling in the 90s. Either one's possible. So what if you want to write a letter to your fellow Christians at these churches? Well, one option would be, let's say it's early, Nero. Emperor Nero is the baddest, awfulest slime ball that's ever come across the face. Well, what are the redactors going to do when they get that letter before it leaves the island? They're going to cut, just like the CIA, right? So nothing's going to get out. But he's writing this stuff, and the Romans go, what? What? A beast and a number? And this guy's really kind of off his nut. You know, he's really kind of, yeah, send it on. It doesn't mean anything. Now, what we don't know, and this makes the idea of conjecture, we just do not know, and there's no way to figure it out as far as I can tell. We don't know what John had previously talked to the people at the 7 churches about on those 2 big trade routes. We just don't know. We don't know what the people were talking about at the local coffee shop. We just don't know. Did John do sermons at some of these churches before he was sent to the Isle of Patmos? Likely, I would think. What did he say in his sermons? What phraseology did he use? We just don't know. So we have to engage in a little bit of conjecture. But I think, with caution, this is pretty sound conjecture. So let's look at these requirements. It's a number of a name. It takes wisdom. It takes understanding. You have to calculate it. And it's just a guy. It's just a man. So let's see if we can calculate. Let's see if we can use a little bit of wisdom, cultural wisdom. Now, to us today, this is going to make 0 sense to modern American culture. It just does. Because we don't place that much significance on numbers. And so we don't deal with changing names into numbers, even though this was fairly popular to the ancient Hebrews, because numbers meant a lot to them, but not so to us.
When he was on that island, could he have visitors?
Well, we just don't know. I mean, we can look at other people that were isolated under house arrest and see.
He could have had conversations with other Christians.
Sometimes
Pretty close.
we know, for example, in other cases of other prisoners, the Romans didn't bother to feed them. They gave you no food. So you had to somehow get your own food. Now, if you had relatives, you know, they would come and bring you a little sack of groceries every now and then so you wouldn't starve to death. But the Romans, what do we care? You know, we're not going to spend any time and money on you. Starve to death? Hey, fine with us. Somebody come in and bring you some food? Hey, knock yourself out. Pretty amazing. So 666. Let's talk about this idea called gematria that I've got up here in blue. Gematria is taking letters of an alphabet and changing them into numbers. It could be Hebrew gematria, it could be English gematria, but it's just a pretty common way, really, when you start looking at the history of doing this. So let's make up a gematria chart in English first, and then we'll look at a Hebrew chart and see if we can figure out 666. So let's take English letters. So here's the English alphabet, right? A through Z. And then now I'm just going to start assigning a number 1 through 9 for these letters. And then once I get to 9, I'm going to go to my next letters and assign those 10 through 90. And then once I'm through with 90, I'm going to go to the next leftover letters and keep on going until I run out of letters. And so, for example, S equals 100 here on this chart. And so you can take any alphabet, Hebrew, Greek, Russian, it doesn't matter, and you just do the same thing. 1 through 9, 10 through 90, 100, and then you jump by hundreds and continue till you're done. So now we could easily figure out the number of a name. So let's, well, I guess I shouldn't pick on somebody because since we're going to be talking about the number of the beast, maybe this is not too good. So let's just do me. So let's say, okay, G. So there's 7. L, there's 30. E, there's 5. And N, there's 50. Okay, so what is my number? Just add them up. What do we get? 50, 80, 87, 92, right? 92. So my number is 92. And now since we've talked about it in a group, just like I think John probably talked about 666 in group, and so they already know, now you guys could say, you know, do you believe any of that stuff that 92 said this morning? And people will say 92, but anybody that's seen this will go, oh, that's the number of Glenn, right? G-L-E-N. We could do the same thing. You know, if we want to do Jessica, we'd find a J. What's a J? 10, and then E, and just keep on going till we're finished, and it will be a number. And of course, there's no way for anybody else to know. You can't really work backwards from the number to a particular name unless you have a lot of other clues somehow. Now, let's flip then to the Hebrew chart. So here's a Hebrew chart. Hebrew has just 22 letters as opposed to our alphabet. And so here we have the Hebrew chart, and let's transliterate. Let's take, in this case, Nero Caesar. Remember the guy that died in 68, killed himself? Although there was that rumor floating around for years that he wasn't really dead. He was just getting a big army, and he was going to come back and take over again, the so-called Nero Redivivus rumor. So if we take this and we make it in Hebrew letters, then we'll get this. Now, Hebrew, we have to read backwards because Hebrew goes the other direction. Many years ago, I was talking to a rabbi about a number of things, just chatting. And he said, well, you know what's wrong with you Americans, right? And I said, what? Because I was disagreeing with him about something. He said, you guys can't even write in the proper direction. And I said, what? You can't write? He said, yeah, think about it a second. He said, you guys write from left to right. And I went, yeah. And he said, but God's language is right to left. So we have to start over here. And if we go this way, transliterating the sounds into the Hebrew letters to make the same sounds, then the first letter here is a nun. There's the N sound for Nero. Nun, what's that? It's a 50. So let's put 50 over here. And then let's go to Resh, the R sound. That's 200. Let's put that down. Let's go to Vaf, and then finally Nun again. And so there's our first word. Now let's go to Caesar. So here let's go Kaf. It's worth 100. Samek is one of the S sounds in Hebrew, worth 60. And finally another Resh, worth another 200. Now if you just add these up real quick, what do we get? 666. Isn't that amazing? 666. If the seven church people have ever thought about this, if John has ever given a sermon, then they would know this in an instant. Now here's the other interesting thing. If we take the Greek, just the common Greek word that John is writing to these people, because he's writing this in Greek, so everybody has a chance of reading it, and you take the word for beast, here it is in Greek, therion. If you translate those sounds into the Hebrew letters to make the same sound, which is what you have to do in any other language that you're moving it into. So if we take this, here's a Taf, Resh, Yod, Vav, Nun. So if we do this and go through the list just like we did before, here's a Taf, the T sound, 400. Here's a Resh again, the R sound, 200. Here's a Yod, the smallest letter. See, it looks like a little, almost like a little apostrophe. You remember when Jesus said, tell you what? Not a jot or a tittle will pass away. I didn't come here to abolish the law. Now, that's what our English translations. What he's really saying is not the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet, which is that little yud. It's the Y sound. It's just like a little touch of the pen. Nor the smallest part of a letter. Like some of these letters, when you draw them, let me look at one. Here we go. See this mem, the M sound? It's got like a little tiny tag on the top of a letter. That's part of the stroke that you use to write that letter. If you're writing it the way they were taught to write it, you kind of make like a boxy thing, and then when you got that done, you go up to the top left and go tick, just a little tick, little tiny fraction to make it into its final letter. Not the littlest letter or the smallest piece of a letter is going to pass away. So let's keep going now. Let's go over to Vav, 6. Let's go to Nun again, 50. And let's go, now we're done, tally it up, and you can see what we're going to get. 666. This would be irresistible to people that put emphasis on numbers. Can you imagine this? People just chatting around the coffee shop, and they would say, you know, if we just look at the numbers, it tells us what this person is. What are they? They're a beast. They're horrible. They're awful. They're a beast. 666. And now we're going to do the same thing again, and it's going to tell us who. Who? Well, it's Nero Caesar. Now, some people would say, well, you can't really say it's Nero Caesar. That's very true, because it's really nearly impossible to work from a number backwards. But since this fits and beast fits, and we know Nero was terrible, he was horrible. And even if Revelation was written late, like during the reign of Domitian, I'm confident that the people would still be talking about how bad things were when Nero was in charge, and Domitian is like just as bad as Nero. So this 666 would still hold true for people to talk about. 666. So it's the number of a name. It requires wisdom. It requires calculation. Let the reader understand, John says. And it's the number of a man. And so I feel really confident that all the people John is writing to had been talking about this. It was just an irresistible thing that both beast and Nero equals 666 independently. And like I said, one tells us what he is, the other tells us who it is. Irresistible to the Hebrews. Now, the caution I mentioned is we can't work backwards absolutely from a number to a name. You got to have a lot of clues. So I'm digging pretty deep into Hebrew culture, what's happening in the day, who's persecuting the Christians, who's killing them right and left. We know Nero would do crazy things like get a person tied to a big stake, roll them up in tar, pitch, tar, and light it like a big flaming candle to light the walkway to go to the party and so forth. Sew them up in animal skins and throw them into an arena and let the lions loose, the hungry lions and things like this. So this was just the way he did things. He was terrible. He was a beast. So that's what I think is happening here. So now, John has introduced us to the dragon, Satan, the devil. He's introduced us to two agents of the dragon, the beast of the sea, the beast of the land. And now he's even naming the beast. Who is it? One of them. It's the Romans in control. If we go back to Daniel, the bad guys, the bad government, the oppressive government there in Daniel was Babylon, right? Before that it was Assyria. After Babylon came Persia. After Persia Greece took over everybody. After Greece, Rome took over everybody. It's just like this never-ending series of the world, of the dragon, of the beast that wants power, influence, wants everybody to do what he says. And we still see that, I think, throughout all of history, that same idea on our big tapestry that we do. So John has talked to us about the 7 seals in vision number 2. First we have the 7 churches, the 7 seals, the 7 warning trumpets, and we see a reenactment of the plagues of Egypt, basically. And the people are still not repenting. Then we're going to see 7 bowls of wrath. Most translations will call this the 7 plagues, the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, but then later on it's called the bowls of wrath. But before we get there, John wants to tell us a few more things to make sure. So let's slide that bowls of wrath down a little bit, and let's put this little interlude in between. So, the dragon, right? John told us about that. So he's explaining this, and then he's going to come back and hit the 7 bowls of wrath. The dragon and the woman, the Messiah. The dragon has always been trying to kill the Messiah and his people, but he never can do it. But he's always been trying. The idea is he's not going to stop until the very end. Then he tells us about the beast from the sea, the beast from the land, and then he's going to go in next to the army of the Lamb. You recall in Revelation 7, John heard 12,000 from the tribe of Judah, 12,000 from the tribe of Levi, 12,000 and so forth. So 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. But then he turned and he saw a multitude of people from every nation and every language and every tribe, an innumerable multitude. So we're going to go back and revisit that 144,000 and the innumerable multitude, which I call the Lamb's army. The army that doesn't really fight to win, the army that basically dies to win, just like Jesus gave his life on the cross to win. So it's really kind of an odd oxymoron in a way. Die to win? Well, that's the way this army works. And then, of course, the 2 choices, like Tom alluded to, over and over and over and over. We're going to see this now. And John's really going to drill into this hard. He's going to hit it over and over again so that you just cannot miss this idea. There's 2 choices. You got to be in one or the other. You got to choose. So now let's continue then and talk about the Lamb's army. And this will bring us back to Revelation 7 that we've already talked about. So the Lamb's army, here we are in chapter 14. John looked, and look, on Mount Zion was the Lamb, the slain Lamb that repeats in here all the time, the slain Lamb, with the 144,000 that had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. So here are the ones that have chosen, right? Their heart, their mind is on scriptures and so forth. I heard a voice like heaven, like a roar of many waters and loud thunder. And the voice I heard was kind of like music. It was kind of like harps playing. Again, we see John kind of struggling with words to try to bring this image, which is really all we've got to use is words, but they're so weak to really describe what we experience. But you just struggle and do the best you can. And they were singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the 24 elders that we heard about earlier. And nobody but the 144,000 could understand or learn this new song, a new thing. Now, with the 144,000, though, we have the innumerable multitude of the Lamb's army. Let's look just a little bit further down in this text. In 14, verse 6 and starting, then John saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel. An eternal gospel. Now, we should really always translate that word gospel, but just by tradition, we never do. It's an old, archaic, Middle English word, good, spell. Good. Today we would say good, G-O-O-D. Spell, news. So that's all it is, good news. But we don't translate it good news. I don't know why, except just tradition, I guess. Gospel sounds cooler. It sounds more churchy, but it just means good news. So this angel with eternal good news flying over the earth to proclaim to everybody. He's going to tell everybody, every nation, every tribe, every language, every people, this never-ending good news, the eternal gospel. And he's going to say to them, look, fear God and worship him. The hour of his judgment is here on the sea and the springs of water. Now, we're going to see why he mentions sea and springs of water coming up. That's part of the bowls of wrath, one of the early bowls of wrath. Now, another angel is going to use Babylon as the symbol for all these oppressive empires, Roman Empire, etc., hearkening back to the Israeli history from Daniel, Babylon. This angel is going around saying, crying out, "Fallen! Babylon, the great, is fallen. She who made nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality." And if we go back to the 7 churches of Asia, remember their thing, the 7 churches, as we go around the trade route? What an amazing thing to look at those. It was praise and criticism and comfort and warning and encouragement all wrapped up. And the major warnings that these various churches got was, you guys have you've forgotten the love that you've had. You've abandoned it. And you're back with the idol food and stuff, and you're back with the sexual immorality. You've merged back with the world. That's your problem. So you kind of come back to the dragon side, right? You forgot. Don't forget. Every church, remember, gets this famous statement I call the I know statement, where Jesus says, "I know each of you 7 churches. I know exactly what you've been going through. I do. I know. I know you've been working hard. I know it's tough. I know you're being beat up right and left." But then we have the word of encouragement. Now, if I was doing like a modern paraphrase version, I would say, Jesus said, "Look, but I got your back." You know, I'm trying to use a symbol that means something more in our time. I got your back. So here's our choice again. The dragon side, the Babylon side, the God side. Where's the mark on your head and on your heart? Where's your mind? Where's your behavior? Where's your actions? What are you doing? That's the choice. And we're going to see this now over and over and over again. The choice. If you choose this, this is what you get. If you choose this, this is what you get. If you choose this, this is what you get. If you choose this, this is what you get. So let's look at that, the choices here. Those with the mark of the beast on their head. So if you're a dragon guy, I was thinking the other day I should get a custom t-shirt made. And on the front it says, "I'm a dragon guy." And on the back it goes, "Nah," or something like this. But I just couldn't stand to spend the $29 for one custom t-shirt. Cool. So another angel came along saying, "Look, if any of you worship the beast," wow, "and its image, or has the mark, then here's what you'll get. You will drink the wine of God's wrath." You remember, who was it, Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath? Probably had to read that in high school English class. Where did he get grapes of wrath? Revelation. He will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger. Oh, look at how he's building this image. Full blast, full strength into the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. The smoke of the torment goes up forever and ever, and they will never have rest. These worshipers of the beast and its image, and all those with the mark. Ooh, that just gives me like goosebumps just to think about that. Well, you pick the side. That's the side you pick. That's what's happening. And John basically is going to say indirectly, but don't do that. So now let's move forward, still in chapter 14. Now, how about if you don't have the mark of the beast? In other words, you have God's mark. That's your choice. You're a God person. Then what will happen? Endure, John says, endure those that keep the commandments of God and the faith in Jesus. Keep on. Keep your mark on God, basically. So John was told to write this. This is the choice for the God people. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. So see the contrast? Dragon side, the God side. But now we're not done. We're going to do that again. John says, so I looked, and behold, seated on the cloud, one like a son of man. There's using that Daniel phraseology, son of man, with a golden crown on his head, a sharp sickle in his hand. Do you guys know what a sickle is? This big, curved, sharp blade that they used to use to harvest wheat, for example. It's on a big, long, curved stick, and you swing that blade, and that curved, sharp blade whips across the ground just a couple inches high and chops everything down. Another angel came out of the temple calling with a loud voice. And he said, get your sickle. It's time to reap. The harvest is ripe. And the one on the cloud swung his sickle, and the earth was reaped. So everything is grown. You got what you got. You did what you did. Now it's time. Now, John's going to tell us the same image again about the harvest. Verse 17. Another angel came out, and he also had a sharp sickle. And the second angel came out from the altar, the angel with authority over the fire, and he called out in a loud voice, and he said, get your sickle and gather the clusters from the vines of the earth, for its grapes are ripe. Now here we're going to get that grapes of wrath symbology popping out in the Old Testament. So the angel, verse 19, swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grapes. We see in the Old Testament lots of times grape harvest is kind of like associated with not such good stuff, right? Noah planted a vineyard and right away he got drunk, and then some bad stuff happened, etc. So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grapes, and they threw them into the great wine press. Now the people back then would know this because every little town had to have a wine press. That's where you got most of your water safely, is drinking wine. It was fairly dilute wine, but wine is pretty safe from foodborne diseases, waterborne diseases, because it's wine. And it has a lot of calories in it. Somebody did a study not too many years ago I came across, and it said the regular people, the poor working people, something like 75% of their calories came from just two things: bread and wine. Most of their calories. So they got some good calories, some nutrition. So if we look in the Bible, we see, much to my surprise when I actually did this, that drinking wine is generally considered a blessing. But getting drunk is a big, giant no-no. And it was hard for them to get drunk if the wine is diluted like 1 part wine, 3 parts water. And by the time you had enough to get drunk, you'd be so full of liquid, you would slosh when you walk. So they would know what a wine press is. And now here's the image John is going to paint. So at this wine press outside the city, blood flowed from the wine press as high as a horse's bridle. Again, using an image that they would see all the time and know. Now, when I think of a horse's bridle, well, I have an idea because I was raised on a farm. But, you know, a city person that wasn't raised on a farm, would that have any imagery for you? You probably have to go look it up or think about it or something. It wouldn't have this gut imagery. And it flowed out for 184 miles. 4 feet high, 4 feet deep, 184 miles of blood. How's that for an image? That's pretty scary, isn't it? We're going to squish the blood out of you in this image. All you evildoers, the grapes of wrath. Now in chapter 15, John's going to introduce the 7 angels with the 7 plagues that will become the 7 bowls of wrath. And John says, I saw another sign in heaven. Great and amazing. 7 angels with 7 plagues. And then now, here's this kind of scary statement, which is the last chance you're going to get. Because with them, the wrath of God is finished. What's the old saying? I'm sick and tired of messing around with y'all, right? I'm going to turn this car right around. It's time. And we're going to see this end times imagery coming up again. Yeah, Tom?
Before we got to 14, you know that verse 12, after these kind of scary images are portrayed. Here's a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. As hard and as scary as Rome and all these challenges are, you better endure because, vengeance is God's. All this that looks like everything's going wrong and Satan rules and right, it's not going to always be that way. You got to endure. That's kind of that theme in Revelation. It's going to look tough, it's going to look bad, like God's not winning, he's out of control. You endure because he's in control and all this is laid out. It's going to happen. And there's going to be a justice in the end for those that basically make the wrong choices.
That choose wisely, right? That choose God. Because you've got to be one or the other. And that's a very good point. Paul also in his letters just so often emphasizes, hang on, you can do it. Look, God is going to work out everything for his good. So, and even Paul said, look at me. I've been beat up how many times? I've been shipwrecked how many times? But I've learned the secret, Paul says, of contentment.
It's interesting in the armor of God, it's the helmet of salvation. That's what protects your thinking, is knowing one day it's all gonna come into focus. It's all gonna be made right one day. Keep your helmet of salvation on. Keep thinking about eternity.
And that's where faith comes in, right? Faith is the evidence and the substance of stuff you can't really see today in your three-dimensional human biological world. But you just have to have faith and you have to trust. And that's what Jesus emphasized so many times to the 7 churches in the first vision of Revelation. Also, and now this is the same thing. And we're going to see that the people are still not going to repent, despite all these things. So John saw what looked like a sea of glass and fire. Now, I can't really imagine that. John is struggling with words. That's all he's got. A sea of glass and fire. And also those who had conquered the beast. Oh, okay. Here's some people that endured, right? Here's some of God's people that endured. They chose wisely. They conquered the beast. They conquered the image. They conquered the number of its name. And now they were standing beside the glass sea with harps of God in their hand. And they sang the song of Moses. And John gives us the song of Moses. And here it is. Now this looks to me like it's inspired by Exodus 15, I think. So the song of Moses. Great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord God the Almighty. Just and true are your ways. We see this Hebrew poetic style in these parallel lines where we build on the same idea. Just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. Who will not fear the Lord and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. Song of Moses. Wouldn't it be great if we had the music for that, if we knew how that really sounded? After this, John said, I looked and I saw the sanctuary in heaven opened, and I saw 7 angels. Here it comes. Here it comes. And with this, God is done. Here it comes. 7 angels and 7 plagues, and they were clothed in pure bright linen, golden sashes around their chests, and the living creatures gave them 7 golden bowls full of God's wrath. God who lives forever and ever. And the sanctuary was filled with smoke and the glory of God and his power, and nobody could even enter or leave until this was done. Now John is going to roll out these bowls. So this would be a really good breaking point for next time. The voice says, go pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. Chapter 16, verse 2. So we're going to walk through angel number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7. Just like we walked through the 7 seals, just like we walked through the 7 trumpets. Now we're going to walk through each of these, and they're going to make a pattern, a very interesting pattern that builds our tapestry. First angel poured out, and these dreadful sores appeared on all the people. Now, is it all the people that it appeared on, though? All the people? The beast people, the dragon people, that's who it appeared on. How about the 144,000 plus the innumerable multitude that chose the slain lamb? We're good. We're good. This is the last time. This is the beginning of the end of time told all over again. So if you want to read ahead for next time, jump in chapter 16 and read about the 7 bowls of wrath and think back of how they seem to mix into back to the Exodus really, plagues that were trying to convince Pharaoh to repent. But he didn't. And likewise, people through the apocalypse of John are just not going to repent. They're just not, most of them are not going to do it. Now, a few do, but not. And so we're going to roll out these 7 bowls of God's wrath next time. Lord willing, we'll see you then.